When it comes to VR games, this channel almost exclusively covers sports simulators, but believe it or not, I actually play other games on my Quest too. I've got the basic bitch library that every headset owner has, you know, your Beat Sabers, Vader Immortals, Job Simulators, and Walking Deads, but more recently, I've been playing an under-the-radar new release called Runner, and it's by far the most action-packed and chaotic VR game I own. The visual style is the first thing that jumps out, and it's for a good reason. It has this retro 80s 90s anime look that I adore, and let me make it very clear, I'm not big on anime.
I don't want to see any more anime stuff.
Current VR hardware can't support realistic looking experiences quite yet, and while some games have certainly tried, it ends up looking on par with something on the PS2. Because of that, most developers opt to give their game a deliberately cartoony look, so things can run smoothly and look sharp. But sometimes, that's taken a step further, and developers go all in to give their game a fun and distinct visual style, and I haven't encountered a better example than this game. Every landscape is hyper-stylized with giant, futuristic-looking skyscrapers and intense neon lights popping from every direction. I just love it. It's all a blur when you're actually playing the game, but when you take the time to look around, or play a level in cruise mode, it's a spectacle. The more anime-looking visuals are held for the story-heavy segments, and the plot of the game is told mostly through this guy, Vice. Apparently, we're a highly sought-after criminal that needs to escape this bustling metropolis without being detained. That Vice dude is on our side though, I think, and before each level, he lays out the game plan for the next mission, but pretty much just tells you how screwed you are.
Once you hit the causeway, they're gonna be all over you. I know. You've got no options left.
And yeah, there's full voice acting done for each character, which sounds really good. The story's nothing all that special, but it suffices. It's entertaining enough and more than contextualizes the gameplay, which is all it needs to do. Each stage has you ride a bike through the streets at breakneck speeds while taking out pursuing drones, bikes, mechs, and whatever else they throw your way. The bike automatically stays on course with the flow of the track, and the manual steering only lets you navigate between lanes and around obstacles. To steer yourself, you move the stick on whichever controller isn't preoccupied, and it works okay. I was disappointed initially that they didn't have motion controls for steering, which I never thought I'd say, but for a VR motorcycle riding game, I thought it was kind of a necessity, but I was wrong. Not because of that observation, but in thinking this would be a VR motorcycle rider. That is not the main element of the gameplay. At its core, this game is a shoot 'em up. More specifically, it tries to emulate the feeling of 90s space shooters like Star Fox and Gradius. Sure, you're riding a bike, but you're not focused on that, you're trying not to get blown to smithereens. Enemies and projectiles are flying at you from every direction, and you've got to go full Rambo to take them all out. You do that with a ton of different weapons. You've got a gun docked at each hand, and when you press A or X, you pick it up in that hand and can shoot with the trigger. I found it really hard to aim with these handguns at first, until I realized that holding the grip button down gives you a laser pointer for razor sharp aim. And you can also set it to be on at all times, which is super handy. These things don't have much ammo though, so you've got to set them down pretty frequently to recharge. But while you're doing that, you can grab the other one and continue shooting if need be. You can draw both at once, but it activates rush mode and slows down time, which pretty much lets you go Super Saiyan for a second. But you need to have enough energy, and you fill that meter by driving too close to oncoming traffic. Those side guns aren't your only weapons though. The bike itself has a launcher built into it that fires when you press the trigger of a dock controller. And if you hold the grab button for a few seconds, you draw these really cool sabers that can both block projectiles and help in close encounters. They're really cool to have, but very underutilized, since no enemies require you to use them. Which I'm not complaining about, it's tough enough to manage everything as is. And we're not done. You also have lock-on missiles you can fire by holding B or Y with a gun in hand, and grenades that pop out of the console when you press that same button without a gun. Then you can just grab it with the grip and send it flying. But I will say, they're like impossible to aim. These developers made the best VR football game, but couldn't get these grenade throwing mechanics down. You have a limited amount of grenades and missiles too, but you can find plenty more lying on the ground as you move through each stage. And in typical shoot 'em up fashion, you'll also find a plethora of upgrades. There's a scatter shot, a charge shot, a line of rockets, a literal laser beam, and these big green aura things, just to name a few. And what's nice is that you can revert to the standard gun if it's more effective for killing something, which is super necessary because some of these upgrades do not work in certain situations. As a whole, everything takes time to get used to, but once you figure it out, it feels very natural to switch hands, take down all different enemies, and weave around oncoming vehicles. I said natural, not easy, because managing everything in such a fast-paced game is tough. This is probably the most difficult game I've played in VR, so if you're typically drawn to that in games, this is one you need to check out. There's so many different enemy types that have unique ways of both attacking you and being attacked. There's bullets and lasers flying at you from all over the place, and it's pure chaos, sometimes to a fault. You'll be steadily progressing through a stage, then enemies pile up and it's simply impossible to keep track of everything. And at that point, you'll let your guard down to a more powerful enemy and they'll take a huge chunk of your health, probably enough to kill you. Then whoop, back to the checkpoint. But even that's if you're lucky. Some stages don't have any checkpoints, and you've got to start from square one. But even in stages that have them, there's only one, and it's a few minutes into the level. In any case, when you make good progress and die, you're going all the way back, and it's really annoying. In doing that, it does force you to get better, but at the same time, having to redo the same section over and over again just to retry one little spot is always frustrating. I really don't like that in games. I'm not against a hearty dose of challenge, but don't make me repeat the same shit as a punishment for dying. That's just not fun. It wears your patience so thin, and when you keep dying toward the end of a section, having to face the realization that you've got to grind for 5 minutes just to get back to where you were makes the hardwood floor beneath you look like a better and better place to slam your headset. But apparently, this was an intentional decision on the developer's part. With that 90s anime art style and 90s shoot-'em-up gameplay, it also wants to replicate that 90s video game difficulty. I wasn't around back then, but I do know that games of the era are notoriously unforgiving, and this one fits right in with them. Being VR though, it brings a whole slew of new challenges that those retro games didn't have. For starters, anyone who doesn't have extensive experience gaming in VR would struggle to play this game for more than a few minutes. As I mentioned earlier, it's so fast-paced, and it's the most action-packed virtual reality experience I've had. So if you're new to the platform, you gotta wait on this. But more importantly, the genre itself just doesn't lend itself to VR very well. On a screen, you're able to see everything you need to, and when you die, you can immediately learn what killed you and plan to avoid it next time. Everything's scripted, and you can memorize attack patterns and recognize the parts that tripped you up to hopefully steer clear of them next time. In this game though, there's too many random elements. The enemies spawn in different parts of the track every time, and you can't really plan for anything. Also, from the viewpoint of the rider, you aren't able to get such a comprehensive view of your environment, which makes keeping track of all the shit flying at you way harder. That's both a good thing and a bad thing, because yeah, it adds a whole new layer of complexity, but it also leads to many deaths that you didn't even see coming. It also makes it more challenging to understand how much space you're taking up in the virtual world, since your body isn't the same size or physically riding a bike. I found myself ducking to avoid things all the time, only to realize the character's still locked in that position and taking damage. On top of that, the hitboxes are kinda whack sometimes, and that's only magnified when you don't have a good feel for where you are. When you die, the world around you freezes and the bike explodes to make you see nothing but the light. But when the world stops, you can take a look at what killed you, and I can't tell you how many times I saw a giant beam or explosion that just wasn't touching me. I get it's difficult to be precise with something like that, but that doesn't make it any less aggravating for the player. It's most prevalent in the boss fights, which I don't really want to spoil for you. They're some of the most exciting parts of the entire game, but also the most unforgiving at times. The only saving grace is that there's no life system. If there was one, this game would be unbearable. But if I'm being honest, I wasn't even able to beat it with the normal settings. Thankfully, there's a free play mode that gives you unlimited health, so you can still see everything the game has to offer, but eliminate the headaches. I beat the first 4 levels genuinely, but the gauntlet of Stage 5 made me throw the towel. And it's a good thing I did, because the level to follow it was even more hectic. That free play mode is definitely what you should roll with on your first playthrough. It gives you a good look at everything you'll encounter and lets you figure out the best method for killing all the different enemies. And once you do that, then you should try it with a health bar, so you can at least know what you're getting into and actually stand a chance. I wouldn't suggest that if the game was long. There's only 7 stages and it takes like an hour or 2 to beat them on your first go, which really is the perfect length. The game's more so built with replayability in mind. There's an online leaderboard to show you how well you fare against other players, a ranking system, and even unlockable bikes with distinct abilities. One gives you double health, one lets you dual wield your side guns whenever you want, and one of them lets you steer while holding a gun in hand. They really shake up the way you approach each level and provide so much incentive to go back. That's what gives the game so much value. There's a massive skill ceiling and the stages are designed to be played again and again. The developers over at Truant Pixel are masters at that. They make a seemingly small amount of content go a long way. As I mentioned earlier, they developed my favorite VR football game, 2MD. which I've praised a ton on this channel for having insanely polished gameplay and arcade-like fun. If you haven't played that yet, you should really go get it, or watch my video about it. But what about Truant Pixel's latest endeavor? Well, I know I've been picking it apart in this video, but that's what I do. Overall, Runner is a really quality game, and the developers are always listening to player feedback and tweaking things to make their experiences that much better. The price tag of $15 is more than reasonable for a VR game, and while the runtime is rather short, the visual variety from level to level on top of a replay-centric design philosophy more than make up for it, and give the package as a whole a pretty solid value. If I'm being honest though, it's just not my thing. It's an exhilarating and stressful experience that I'm just not typically looking to have when I go to play a video game. The genre itself just isn't one that appeals to me, but if it's your thing, this is the perfect VR game for you. I don't think there's another one quite like it. But I want to know what you think. Have you played Runner? And what did you think of it? Let me know in the comments down below. Also, a huge shout out to Truant Pixel for providing me a review copy, and for helping me when I got stuck. You guys are the best. If you want to see more videos like the one you just finished up, check out some of my VR sports reviews using the cards on screen. And please, have a great rest of your day. I'll see you later.